When my husband's niece first came to stay with us, I truly believed it would be temporary. She had just moved to the city for university, and my husband insisted that family should always support family. I agreed without hesitation. I imagined a polite, grateful young woman who would focus on her studies and quietly build her future. Instead, one morning, she stood in my kitchen, tossed a pile of clothes onto the chair, and said in a commanding tone, "Wash my things and make breakfast." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. I was standing at the stove, already preparing coffee before heading to work. The early sunlight filled the kitchen, and everything felt peaceful, until her words cut through the calm like a knife. She didn't say please. She didn't smile. She didn't even look embarrassed. She simply expected it. I slowly turned to face her. She was scrolling through her phone, as if giving orders to a household assistant instead of speaking to the woman whose apartment she was living in for free. I forced a calm smile and asked, "Excuse me." She sighed dramatically, as though I were the problem. I said, "Wash my clothes and make breakfast. I have an early class." In that instant, something shifted inside me. This was my apartment. I paid the mortgage. I paid the bills. I worked long hours to maintain this home. And here was someone who contributed nothing, demanding service as if it were her right. But instead of exploding, I chose silence. Not weakness, strategy. I quietly poured my coffee and said, "The washing machine is in the bathroom. And there are eggs in the fridge." Her expression changed from irritation to shock. She wasn't used to being told no. "You're home anyway," she replied. "It's not like you're doing anything important." Those words hurt more than I expected. I worked remotely 3 days a week. Just because I was physically at home didn't mean I wasn't working. But she saw me sitting with a laptop and assumed I had endless free time. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply said, "We'll talk tonight." All day, I thought about what had happened. I replayed her tone, her entitlement, her complete lack of respect. I also thought about my husband. He loved his niece dearly. He often excused her behavior, saying, "She's young," or, "She doesn't mean it." But this wasn't immaturity. This was arrogance. That evening, when my husband returned from work, I asked him to sit down. His niece was in her room, laughing loudly on the phone. I calmly described what happened. I repeated her exact words. To my surprise, he laughed. "She's just joking," he said. "Don't take it so seriously." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Do you think it's funny?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "You know how kids are." Kids. She was 22. I felt a deep wave of disappointment, not just in her, but in him. It wasn't about laundry or breakfast. It was about boundaries, respect, dignity. I realized that if I didn't address this now, it would only get worse. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I prepared breakfast, but only for myself. I cleaned my own dishes and left for a short walk before starting work. When I returned, the kitchen was a mess. Dirty plates, open cereal boxes, milk left out, and her laundry, still in a pile. She came out of her room around noon, looking annoyed. "Why didn't you wake me?" she asked. "I'm not your alarm clock," I replied gently. She rolled her eyes. "Uncle said you'd help me." That was it. I walked to my desk, opened a drawer, and took out a printed sheet of paper I had prepared the night before. It was a simple document titled, "Living Arrangement Guidelines." I handed it to her. She laughed at first, until she realized I was serious. The paper clearly stated, "Everyone cleans up after themselves. Laundry is individual responsibility. Shared spaces must be respected. Groceries are divided. If these rules are unacceptable, alternative housing should be considered." She looked at me as if I had betrayed her. "You're kicking me out?" she asked. "No," I said calmly. "I'm asking for respect." Her face turned red. She stormed into her room and slammed the door. That evening, she called my husband at work before he even got home. When he arrived, he looked frustrated. "Was this necessary?" he asked, holding the paper. "Yes," I answered firmly. We argued for nearly an hour. He accused me of being too strict. I reminded him that this was my home too. "She's family," he repeated. "And I'm your wife," I replied. Silence filled the room. For the first time, he seemed to understand. Days passed. The tension in the apartment was heavy. But something interesting happened. She started doing her own laundry. She began washing her dishes. She stopped giving orders. She didn't apologize, but her behavior changed. One evening, about a week later, she approached me quietly. "Can you show me how you organize your work schedule?" she asked. It wasn't a demand, it was a question. I nodded. As we sat at the table, she admitted that she had always lived with her parents, who did everything for her. She had never learned basic independence. Moving to the city terrified her. Acting confident was easier than admitting she felt lost. For the first time, I saw vulnerability instead of arrogance. I didn't mean to disrespect you, she said softly. That was the closest I would get to an apology. And it was enough. Over time, we developed a different relationship. Not perfect, not warm and affectionate, but respectful. My husband later confessed that he had grown up in a household where women automatically served everyone. He had never questioned it. But watching you stand your ground, he said one night, made me realize how unfair that is. That moment mattered more than any apology. This experience taught me something powerful. People will treat you the way you allow them to treat you. If you stay silent to keep peace, you may end up losing your voice. But if you speak calmly and clearly, you set the tone for how you expect to be treated. It's not about being harsh. It's about self-respect. Sometimes, the strongest response isn't shouting. It's saying no, and meaning it. And sometimes, the person who demands breakfast and laundry isn't truly demanding service. They're testing boundaries. When you hold those boundaries with dignity, you don't just change their behavior. You change the entire dynamic. Today, my husband's niece still lives with us, but she contributes to rent, cooks dinner twice a week, and even surprises me with coffee occasionally. The girl who once threw clothes on my chair now knocks before entering my workspace. Respect wasn't forced, it was taught, and it started with 3 simple words. No, do it yourself. After that first fragile conversation at the kitchen table, things did not magically transform overnight. Respect is not built in a single apology. It is built in repeated actions, small choices, daily discipline. And for the next few weeks, our apartment became a quiet battlefield of habits being broken and rebuilt. At first, her changes felt mechanical. She washed her own clothes, but she did it loudly, slamming the washing machine door as if it had personally offended her. She cleaned her dishes, but she left tiny crumbs on the counter, almost as if to prove she was cooperating without fully surrendering. I noticed everything, but I didn't comment, because growth needs space. One evening, I came home from grocery shopping and saw something unexpected. The kitchen table was covered with notebooks. She was studying, headphones on, highlighters scattered everywhere. The sink was empty. The trash had been taken out. She looked up when I entered. I made pasta, she said, almost defensively. There's some left if you want. It wasn't an emotional moment. There was no dramatic music playing in the background. Just a simple statement, but for me, it meant more than she could imagine. Thank you, I replied. And I meant it. Later that night, my husband sat beside me on the couch. She's trying, he said quietly. I know, I answered. There was less tension in his voice now. Less defensiveness. Something in him had shifted too. For years, he had unconsciously expected that women carried the invisible weight of the household. He wasn't cruel, he simply never questioned the pattern he grew up seeing. His mother woke up first, slept last, and never complained. Service was considered love, but love without respect becomes exhaustion. And I was no longer willing to be exhausted in my own home. A few days later, his niece knocked on my office door during my work hours. Can I ask you something? She said hesitantly. I nodded. How do you make people take you seriously? The question surprised me. What do you mean? I asked. At university, she admitted, some professors ignore me. Some classmates talk over me. And when I try to speak confidently, I feel fake. For a moment, I saw myself at her age, uncertain, wanting to appear strong, afraid of being dismissed. You don't make people take you seriously, I said gently. You take yourself seriously first. She frowned slightly. I continued, confidence isn't about volume. It's about consistency. When you set boundaries calmly and stick to them, people adjust. She looked thoughtful. Like you did with me, she said. I smiled. Yes, exactly like that. That conversation marked a turning point. The arrogance that once filled her tone began to soften. She still had moments of impatience. She was young, after all, but now she caught herself. Sometimes she would start to say something sharp and then pause. Sorry, she would correct. And every time she did, I felt something healing, not just between us, but within the household. Meanwhile, my husband began participating more in the daily routine. Without announcing it, he started washing dishes after dinner. He learned how to operate the washing machine properly. He even cooked breakfast on weekends. The first time he placed a plate of eggs in front of me, he said awkwardly, "I guess I should have been doing this all along." I didn't say, "I told you so." I simply said, "I appreciate it." Because change acknowledged is change encouraged. One Saturday afternoon, something unexpected happened. His niece's parents, my in-laws, came to visit. I felt a familiar knot in my stomach. I knew how quickly narratives could twist. I imagined her mother complaining that I had been too strict, or unwelcoming. But what actually happened shocked me. While we were sitting in the living room, her mother said proudly, "She told us you made her independent." I blinked. "She even does her own laundry now," her father added, half jokingly. "We're impressed." I looked at her. She looked slightly embarrassed but didn't deny it. "It was time I learned," she admitted. In that moment, I realized something powerful. Boundaries do not destroy families. They strengthen them. That night, after everyone left, she knocked on my bedroom door. "I used to think you were mean," she confessed with a small laugh. "But I think I was just uncomfortable." "Why uncomfortable?" I asked. "Because you didn't act like everyone else," she said. "You didn't automatically serve. You didn't argue loudly. You were calm. And that made me feel exposed." Exposed. The word stayed with me. Sometimes when someone reacts negatively to your boundaries, it isn't because you're wrong. It's because your strength highlights their immaturity. Weeks turned into months. Our apartment felt lighter. She began contributing financially, even though we hadn't pressured her. It wasn't a large amount, but it symbolized responsibility. She created a study schedule and taped it to her wall. She started waking up earlier. She asked for advice, not orders. One evening, she came home visibly upset. "They gave a group presentation slot to someone else," she said angrily. "Even though I prepared more." "Did you speak up?" I asked. She hesitated. "No." "Why?" I didn't want to seem difficult. I leaned forward. Respect doesn't come from silence. It comes from clarity. The next day, she spoke to her professor. And she got the presentation. When she returned home, she didn't shout with excitement. She simply placed her bag down and said, "You were right." It wasn't about being right. It was about watching someone grow. Meanwhile, my marriage quietly improved. My husband began asking, "How can I help?" Instead of assuming I would handle everything. We discussed household responsibilities openly. Not as accusations, but as teamwork. One night, he admitted something that surprised me. "I think I was afraid," he said. "Afraid of what?" I asked. "Afraid that if you stopped doing everything, I would have to change. And change is uncomfortable." Honesty like that doesn't happen in chaotic relationships. It happens when someone models calm strength. Months later, his niece received an internship offer in another district. It meant she would need to move closer to her workplace. The night she told us, the room felt strangely emotional. "I found a small studio apartment," she said. "I think I'm ready." Ready. The word echoed in my mind. On her last evening with us, she stood in the same kitchen where she had once thrown clothes on a chair and demanded breakfast. Only this time, she was cooking dinner for all of us. After we ate, she handed me a small gift. It was a simple notebook. "For your plans and boundaries," she joked softly. Inside the cover, she had written, "Thank you for teaching me how to stand on my own feet." I felt my throat tighten. Not because I needed gratitude, but because transformation had happened. Real transformation. When she moved out, the apartment felt quieter, but not empty. It felt balanced. And I realized something essential. Strength is contagious. When one person refuses to accept disrespect, it forces everyone else to re-evaluate their behavior. If I had shouted that first morning, it would have become a power struggle. If I had silently washed her clothes, it would have become a pattern. But I chose a third option. Calm boundaries, clear expectations, no humiliation, no drama, no revenge, just self-respect. And self-respect has a ripple effect. Today, when I look back at that moment, her voice demanding breakfast, I no longer feel anger. I feel gratitude, because that uncomfortable morning exposed deeper issues in my marriage, in our family dynamic, and even in generational expectations. It forced conversations that should have happened long ago. It reminded me that kindness without limits becomes self-neglect. And it proved something I now carry with certainty. You can be compassionate without being compliant. You can be patient without being passive. And you can love family without sacrificing your dignity. Sometimes the most powerful lesson you teach someone isn't through advice. It's through example. And sometimes, the girl who once ordered you to wash her clothes leaves your home knowing how to wash her own life, independently, responsibly, confidently. All because you chose to say no. Calmly. And mean it.